We might need to start. Oh, we've started. Well, hold on. See, listening to me. We usually start this way, rough, so it's okay. I have got to. There it is. Hopefully, okay. Waiting for it to pop up on the page. There you go. Like it and share to my Facebook page. And then, whomsoever, whomsoever want to hang out. Oh, we are discussing the importance of addressing the widespread violence against women and steps to rectify its pervasiveness. Yeah. So we started about 5 minutes late. Do we want to wait 5 more minutes?
No. Well, we were live, so
We're here and not sure who else is going to join us. Well, let me just go on and do the preliminaries. My name is Thandisizwe Chimurenga. I am a journalist and author and a commentator on Tongva land out here in Los Angeles. And our sister, Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade, is running just a wee of a tad bit behind, but she will be here to take over, leading us in this discussion because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I'm joined by my sister colleagues, Corrie Claiborne, professor of literature you're at Morehouse, ma'am,
I am.
and Dr. Kenja McCray, PhD, professor of history at Clayton State University. And we have two other sisters who usually join us. I don't know if they're going to be here today. Professor Nozibele Waithe, uh, professor of anthropology, and Reverend Estee Nena Dillard. We were just talking about Corey and I. I don't know if you were here, Kenja. All the names that Reverend Estee Nena Dillard has. Reverend minister, priest, and queer sexologist. Not sure if they're going to join us this morning or not. I almost didn't join y'all, so I can't speak on others. But again, October's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we wanted to talk about this issue and how pervasive it is, possibly why it is, and what are some of the things that we can do to address it. Corey, you go first. No, I'm just playing. I'm just playing with you. But we are glad that we have a historian on today. As a journalist, I should be armed with the stats at all times, but I have to admit, I've been doing a lot the last few weeks, and so I wasn't even prepared for today. I wasn't, part of me didn't want to come, but because I missed the last one, it's like I got to show up. So I'm here to do what I can. I've shown up, here to do what I can. But Kenja, do you have a historical perspective for us?
I don't. And yeah, same thing. This was this topic was kind of surprising to me. So I found out about it when I saw the ad, and I've had so much on my plate. But I mean, I can't I teach women's history, and usually the issue of violence against women comes up with probably w- why women advocated for temperance in the early 20th century, late 18th, 19th century, early 20th century, and then again after or during the second wave feminist movement.
Hmm.
And so the book that I teach from doesn't have too many stats, but it does kind of do a quick overview of some of the legislation that came in the aftermath of the second wave feminist movement, like the Clary Act and the Violence Against Women Act.
And when you say
So,
Clary, is that the Jean Clary Act?
yes, that
Ah,
requires
hmm.
reporting, yeah, of violence, campus violence. So
Hmm.
women will know, or people in general, but especially
Right.
women will know and can make informed decisions based on
And
it.
ask me how I
Mhm.
know about that.
How do you know about that, Tandi?
Because again, speaking with Corrie before you got here, I was talking about the fact that I was voluntold to be the executive, the editor in chief of my college newspaper, Los Angeles City College Collegian. And we just had some incidents on campus. We've been trying to get the police reports, which we're supposed to have access to for the last month and a half, well, 2 months now since August. And the police have not turned them over. And the professor, my advisor, she's like, you are in violation of the Clery Act, which says blah, 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 blah. Students have a right to know about crimes happening on their campus and have a right to that data. Of course, we have a right to be safe, but they have a right to that data. You're supposed to publish incident reports, make them freely available. And interestingly enough, on the campus of Los Angeles City College, there is no campus police. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department patrols the campus at LACC. So the sheriff's just doing what they do out in the hood. They just doing what they do. They're not providing us the police reports just yet. But because it is a campus facility, because it is a college student newspaper, we have some resources that we are able to, knock on the door with, excuse me, hi, we're here, we're not going away. But
And I think that's
yeah.
one of the things that's really interesting, right? There
Mhm.
are what we know about the issue, but I think the larger issue is so much of it is unknown, and
Mhm.
people are not trying to find answers for, to identify women. I mean,
Mhm.
we're talking about this violence issue, what happens on campus, what happens off campus, really is about naming and claiming and identifying. If you think about how many Black women are just missing, Native American women missing,
Mhm.
nobody looking for them. And especially when you think about Native American women, when they find bodies of women and
Mhm.
children, the fact that they can't identify them, right?
Mhm.
And it's something like 500 of these women
Mhm.
that they found in recent years. There's probably 9 million Native Americans in the country. If
Mhm.
you think about, most of them do not live on tribal lands. We're talking about in major areas like Los Angeles, which is the largest enclave of Native American people.
Mhm.
Um, there are hundreds of missing women, Native American women, but they'll say, oh, well, we don't know. We found a body.
Mhm.
We think she's Native American, but we don't know her
Mhm.
name, she's from, and
Mhm.
there's like sort of no reporting. So we know that these things happen, but there is, I think, this sort of unspoken crisis, right? That
Mhm.
it trickles down into all sort of areas. And I
Mhm.
also think about, when I was even thinking about what we were going to talk about today, in literature, I kind of went back to thinking about that, right? This moment where we hear about violence against women, and we can think about in our most popular literature, particularly when Black women were claiming space in '70s. So we think about The Color Purple. We think
Mhm.
about For Color Girls Who Consider Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. We think about any of Alice Walker's works, really, or any of Toni Morrison's works, or any of these other kind of women who are kind of saying, let's tell the fullness of a Black woman's story. And we have to talk about the ways in which domestic violence happens between uh, fathers and cousins and other kind of people in the home. And it was a real like watershed. And I think that, and
Mhm.
I think about this too when we're thinking about The Color Purple coming out again at the end of the year as a musical. And so people are so excited about that. But I always go back to that moment, if just thinking about that, those early days of Black women, what it meant to just say, let's talk about this how Black women are not safe, Black women and girls are not safe in a house full of men. Let's talk about that. And let's talk about how we get to the place we are now, where, and especially during the pandemic, I mean, I don't know the statistics, but do know that we were already in a crisis with all of these things happening. and then it increased like 30 to sometimes to 50% in terms of the amount of women that are that have been involved in some kind of, that are murdered literally, but that have been involved in some kind of domestic violence, like especially during the pandemic. And I think that
Yeah.
now, I mean, we're talking about 1 in 3, but I think they said there are 5 Black women and girls killed every single day, mostly by guns, in the United States every single day. And we have, I think, back to this early Color Purple that we enjoyed, where really what Alice Walker is trying to tell you is that look how difficult it is for women to be able to exist in this place. Look at the vulnerability they have to violence in this place. For color girls is, you know, I can't talk about the Tyler Perry version because I couldn't get through it, but maybe it was good. I don't know. We'll just have to do what it do. But you know, there's that.
It doesn't exist. How about that?
I do, and then that's what people were like. What? I was like, I don't know nothing about it, right? Like so. But you know, there's that. I'm hoping everybody has read or seen a version of the play. I will discuss something. I'm sorry if it's a spoiler alert, but it literally came out in 1976. So I feel like you should have seen it by now. I don't know. So, but you know, there's a couple of moments where, and especially that last moment where this man grabs this woman's children, and he's hanging them out the window, right? Which is the sort of this moment after they've described all of these things that happened in the Black woman's life. And then that you get to that point. And I think what happens is that for me, for color girls, along with Color Purple, along with Bluest Eye, along with all of these things, really kind of said, if nothing else, we have to speak about it or it's not going to change, right? We have to talk about it or it's not going to change. And I feel like we've been going along and saying this. And again, I feel like nobody recognized Color Purple for the real way it talked about domestic violence and abuse, you know, for Black women in general, like literally set that conversation. So I just want us to think about that moment where we realized, even for ourselves, maybe we can all talk about that, because I know that was my moment. Just to think about the heightened vulnerability that Black women have to violence. That was my moment through literature. But maybe, I don't know if anybody else wants to talk about how they came to that same moment.
Well, I know what I remember most is the backlash to all of that. The backlash to all of those works and their adaptations, but which also speaks volumes, which loudly speaks volumes to what it is we're talking about. But we've been joined by Nozibele Waithe, Dr. Nozibele Waithe, our anthropologist. So please, sis, welcome.
Oh,
Good to see you.
hey, I'm not a doctor, but I'm not a doctor. I only play one on TV. So,
I'm going to pretend I didn't say that.
this whole thing about violence is really it's an epidemic for Black women, and I don't think that we talk about it and address it as such. I think one of the most powerful moments in TV came years ago, and I don't know if any of you all remember the movie, the television series American Gods. If you all watched any of that, it's Neil Gaiman. It's some cases problematic, but Orlando Jones was playing Inyasi, and he was speaking to the female deity, African deity Biliquis, as well as Thoth. And in his speech, he was talking about how African people, specifically African women, are treated. And it was such a powerful speech. I show it to my class because in his speech, every 10 seconds, he'll stop and he'll say, snatched. That's another Black girl. So you get the feeling in real time of things that are happening to Black women in the community. And he's talking about to watch it and to know that when he says it, that, oh my God, this is this is real, right? So from an anthropological point of view, the whole issue of power, of violence against women, deals with power, trying to maintain power, trying to make sure people know who has the power. And as Dr. McCray said earlier, you can see some pushback and violence against women as feminism evolves, in the different stages. The violence is, that's perpetrated on women is different. So we look at the ways that people try to exert power of women globally. We have honor killings for women. We have the dowry murders. We have women that acid is thrown in their face. We have forced feeding in some cases, right? Then we have sexual harassment. Then we have, just like all marital rape, we have human trafficking. All of these things are affecting women across the globe, but African women disproportionately. Because when we look at the scale, African American women, some people like to say, we occupy the bottom level because a lot of times our position intersects with race, gender, and class. So a lot of, if a woman is poor, right? If she's a woman, if she's a poor Black woman, if she goes missing, people aren't really going to look for her. They always chalk it up. It was a podcast I listened to years ago, and they said when a person of color goes missing, the first response is, oh, they must have wandered off. Even though you have all of this, evidence to the contrary, So I think when we said we would talk about something like this, I was like, oh, that's a heavy topic. That's, something that I want to continue to try to talk about, Black love and Black joy. But in order for us to break through that Black love and Black joy, sometimes we have to deal with and have difficult conversations so that we can move past it and so that we can heal.
And we've been joined by Reverend Estee Nena Dillard, who has names that I have forgotten. Ifetayo usually remembers all of the names, but I can't remember them today, sis. But glad to see you. How you doing?
I'm excellent. Good to see everybody. I'm just going to ditto everything that Nozibele just said, and just add to that. That also does get intensified when we talk about trans women and trafficking, sex work, and queer women, and also the intimate partner violence that occurs there is another way that we lose a lot of Black women through violence.
And I wanted to add two things. I think Professor Waithe, when you said Orlando Jones played in Yasi, you meant Anansi.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Yasi is her family friend. And to just add on to what we were all saying, this year's Norwegian Nobel Prize Committee has awarded the Nobel Peace Prize to, I hope I get her name right, Narges Mohammadi, for her fight against the oppression of women in Iran and her fight to promote women's rights and freedom for all. And it goes on to say, and this reminds me so much of Fannie Lou Hamer's case, right? The personal cost that she has paid for speaking out for holistic human rights, right? So it says the Iranian regime, the regime in power in Iran, has arrested her 13 times, convicted her 5 times, sentenced her to a total of 31 years in prison and 153 lashes. So yes, domestic violence, violence on campuses, we brought that up, and state violence. So and very much an expression of power and dominance, masculinist power and dominance in this case.
And I want to mention that Morehouse College just gave an honorary doctorate to Dr. Denis Mukwege from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and he set up the Panzi Hospital, because in the Congo, one of the things that happened because of civil war, of other kind of strife, is that they started using militarized rape and violence against women in order to set this kind of level of, I mean, I didn't, it's like sort of beyond depression. He says that literally him in a small hospital have treated 90,000 women, right? And not only do they treat them because of this militarized rape by the by the people that be who want to keep the Congo disabled and all this other kind of stuff, is that he also does wraparound services. So not only does he think about how to heal them physically, he tries to provide job training, psychological training. He tries to make sure that they have economic opportunities so that they alone, not having to worry about men, can be able to provide for their families and everything else. And I was wondering, like, God, do you have to be? And he's also won the 2018 Nobel Prize for his work. And I'm like, do you have to be this person? The sacrificial person, because he's had assassination attempts. He literally lives at the hospital because of the fact that people are so threatened that this man would stand up for women, make sure that women are healed, make sure that they have some ability to operate in society, like literally threaten his life, right? I was wondering, like, what does it mean to protect Black women, which has been the hashtag for so long, when it is like even talking about helping women. So in Iran or Africa or in Atlanta, it becomes this, oh, you're trying to threaten the status quo. You're trying to do all of these other things. I mean, I'm thinking about even Meg Thee Stallion and the things that she went through. And the fact that you wanted to come and say, yeah, no, this man shot her in her foot, right? She's the victim. She didn't even bring the case. The state did, but you want to go after her because she deigned to go after a Black man, or to tell the truth about a Black man. And I will say this too. I mean, being at Morehouse, we have these kind of conversations with students about, in the AUC, because when we talk about rape, sexual violence, all these other kind of stuff, there's always this thing like, oh, well, we can't mention it. We don't want to, well, think about the student at Morehouse. We're reporting on him. Will that hurt his chances? Will it make the school look bad? Will you be able, you know what I mean? Like, there's always this kind of like, oh, we need to keep it in-house because we don't want to make, the school to look like we have sexual violence on campus. And this kind of like, you can't be silent and protect Black women, ultimately, I think.
And I think that plays a little bit into respectability politics too. Black people, what goes on in the house, you keep it in the house. You're not supposed to tell anybody. And that's how abuse continues to be perpetrated. Absolutely. And going back to Meg Thee Stallion, when she got treated Harlem Night style, it goes back to ideas of people who deserves to be protected, right? Because I know a lot of people will argue about Meg Thee Stallion's persona, right? And then they will make assumptions of her based on her persona. Because I've heard people was like, well, maybe she was coming at him like that, or maybe she was doing so, so just trying to put the blame on her for being the victim. So again, it goes back to us knowing that all Black women, all women in general, deserve to be protected. Right? We deserve not to have violence enacted upon us, despite whatever choices that we make, right? If I go out there and I decide to, I probably wouldn't, to have my mini skirt on and shake my behind, that doesn't mean that I need to get hit in the head with a brick because I refuse somebody's advances. That's just ridiculous. And for other people to stand, other men to stand around and not do anything, it's just criminal.
I started out talking about I was unprepared today with statistics, but Kenja, one of the projects that I became involved in, I guess it was it this year or last year? Anyway, I have begun looking into the incidents of harm against Black women in revolutionary or Black liberation movement organizations and what sisters did in response to those incidents of harm. And the impetus for that, for me, was coming across an article, sister veterans of Okunsade, the armed wing of the African National Congress, talking about how they were young women in their teens and 20s and wanted to be part of the liberation struggle. They would leave home and join these camps, and they would be trained as soldiers to fight against apartheid in South Africa. But they would also periodically have to fight off their brother soldiers who thought it was cool for them to attempt or to rape them. And because them sisters was packing 45s, a lot of them brothers got rebuffed. They figured they effed around and they found out. Oh, yeah. So when those sisters once those sisters were prepared to throw hot lead at their male comrades' way, a lot of that stuff stopped. But the point being is that it existed. Why was it there in the first place? We're fighting side by side for liberation, or so we thought.
But you know, a lot of times, and I know Dr. McCray, well, everybody can speak on this. When we were fighting for liberation, right? The true liberation that they were fighting for back then was the remaking of the world in a Black masculinist view. Let's be honest about it. You know, the true liberation was about replacing the white patriarchy with African patriarchy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So women really didn't figure into that until later on. We began to be reflexive about, you know, the movements. It was because of the voices of these women speaking up and speaking out and giving voice to it and calling out all this injustices. But in the beginning, that was never really the plan.
That was never really the plan from the beginning, from the get-go.
Yeah, and I don't think it was overt. It's just that if this was existing in a world that was dominated by patriarchal societies. And again, back to Corrie's point, it was women and women's allies, Black women and Black women's allies, who spoke out about that and broke it down and said that that's no revolution at all. If you're exchanging, a white male dominated patriarchy for, you know, all hands on deck patriarchy, right? So and we had to undo that. And to your point, Tandi, I wondered when we were going to get into the discussion of whether self-defense, learning self-defense tactics, how helpful they might be I guess mitigating violence against women. But it makes me think, okay, but then like more than 6% of women in the military report sexual assault, as opposed to like less than 1% of men reporting it, which it could be an issue with reporting. But being armed, I think, can help to an extent, but then also we have to think of escalation of violence when violence against women, in particular Black women, is so normalized. So you might be armed, and then so they might be like, "Oh, them sisters armed," so then we got to come to them in a pack or whatever. You have to come with even more force. And I think a part of it, a part of the solution may be self-defense, but a large part of the solution is a greater, addressing a greater problem of ways in which masculinity are constructed via a toxic level of violence, right? Use of violence, and not just on women, on each other too. So yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like unless you're gonna sleep with one eye open and a hand on the trigger, right? Like and the fact that I was talking about Ray Caruth when to Tandi when I first came on. I mean, this kind of idea that especially women when they're pregnant, right? That you have to worry about your partner, and I think there was a case in Atlanta, maybe this year, earlier this year, that you have to worry about, oh, I just don't want to pay for no more kids, or I don't want to do it. Like, you don't know, you don't expect, and that there would be this kind of heightened violence around from your partner at a time when you need, I guess, the most support. And I feel like there has to be. I mean, when they talk about what they can do, I didn't even know, for example, there was a march against Black femicide last year. There's this woman, I think she's in Arkansas, that's been talking about this fact that women are killed by, I mean, she really even said, honestly, do Black men hate us? Because it's seeming like they do. Right? If it is that we are so easily killed because we give birth to their children, because they just don't want to talk to us, or it is that we rebuff their advances, so that's a reason for us to be shot and killed. Is it that we don't have a conversation about what they know about Black women, how they feel about us? Because I do think it is a larger thing that's not going to be just, can we, have self-defense? It's going to be like, what can we do so that, we're not a, extension of you. You don't deserve our time and attention. If you get somebody pregnant, yes, you gonna have to pay for that baby, right? Like, that's not a reason to kill somebody, right? And somebody, Nozibele had mentioned honor killing. And I remember when I first heard about sati, that practice in India, where when the husband dies, you throw the wife on top of the funeral pyre because she doesn't have any more value in the world. And I was like, there has to be a world. It has to be a change in the world where you think that woman's only value is that man. That has to change across the board, right? That has to change. I mean, I'm thinking about my friend who's Asian, who, because of policies like one child that they could have, female children were like, she was thrown in the garbage can because there was another girl child in a family. They're like, oh, we have no use for this child. And then when I try to explain to students, it's like, when I say that femicide is the term you should use, that means that people are killing girls and women simply because they're girls and women, right? It's not just like, oh, the homicide rates are this, or it is domestic violence, but femicide, like, you are killing because that person's a woman. And we really need to name that, claim that, talk about it, and put it in a global perspective. So I agree.
And we also need to be wary of one of the things that our commentator is talking about, that minimizing, what does she say? That we must not minimize. Let me read the thing she's saying. We mustn't minimize the role that white hegemony plays in influencing our dynamics, Black men and women. We're colonized people trying to survive under existential threat. This is true. But at the same time, this is happening. And we can either theorize and philosophize about the role of white supremacy, or we can name what's happening now and come up with a solution for it. So, in other words, okay, so because of white supremacy, this is what Black men and Black women are doing, i.e., let's get rid of white supremacy. Right. Okay, that sounds good. But if I'm part of a liberation organization with you and you're attempting to rape or kill me, how do I get to the white supremacy?
Right.
How does explain that to me? I can't get to the white man who I really want to put whose throat I really want to put my hands around. I'm trying to get to him.
Right.
How do I do that?
And I also think it's important for us not to romanticize Africa or get caught up in the mythic past and act like everything was a utopia. Because if Africa was so perfect, we wouldn't be where we are now, right? Africa had problems. We had, systematic problems. We had problems with the state. And if you look at some traditional African cultures, women were having violence enacted upon them before the white people came. So we can't say that, okay, the result of this is solely the fact that we were colonized or we were enslaved. Right. So let's look at it, because the only way that we can really heal, if we have to take this hard, uncomfortable look at ourselves. And a lot of times when I hear people talk about the wonderfulness of Africa, the innocence of Africa, we have to be real, and we have to look at how we contributed to this. Just let's be real about it. Because there were patriarchal societies in Africa.
Oh yeah.
They weren't all matriarchal. They weren't all matrilocal. So African patriarchy is a real living, breathing thing.
And I'm thinking about, Ife just went to Ethiopia. I mean, the practice of how they choose brides was that they would go and steal a girl like 13, rape her, and then the family would force that girl to marry the rapist, right? That was the process of getting married. And Ethiopia is one of the places that, wasn't colonized, right? So you do have to think about what it means to sort of exist in a society and why that happens, right? And really, it is about power. We all know. If you can make sure that the women who are forced to have children are not allowed, in much of Africa too, like these sort of child brides, these women that are raped, they are taken out of school. They're not allowed to be leaders. It sort of puts them in this domestic realm that doesn't allow them to ascend to any power, right? And that's the reason you do it. That's the reason why it happens in Congo. We just going to make sure that you're under this power structure. The best predictor, even in the United States, of poverty is if a woman has children, right? So I think you have to talk about, let's talk about the power structure. And for women, maybe even changing the power structure, not valorizing things where we're not going to talk about. And I think that this is why this conversation is so important. People don't talk about this, right? Like that sort of 1 in 3 Black women are going to have to deal with domestic violence in America. That's huge. 5 Black women and girls killed a day. That's huge. So why is it not being talked about? And I think ultimately because it is about power, right? It's about power. It's about a shift in this kind of patriarchal notion of the way power should work. And I think that's a scary conversation, but we need to have it.
I also think making the conversation accessible is important. So I think things like this are really, really critical, because it is a thing that is a part of our reality. It's a part of our embodied experience. It's in our DNA because of our history and how we have held Black women, how our ancestors have been held. And it's a part of our community and a part of our family. And so I think we've kind of pointed towards that in other places, but I just wanted to kind of explicitly say too that, wherever you are and however you have seen and experienced it, that's a place that you can name. That's where you can start talking about it and creating just a space to be able to acknowledge and know that in and of itself is subversive to the culture of violence against women, and makes room for us to name that truth, to be able to liberate ourselves from that truth.
Agreed. And I feel like, since I see the word ahistorical and anti-intellectual in this comment, that Kenja should respond. But at the same time, I mean, usually I ignore trolls, but because this comment will end up remaining, long after this is over with, there are things that, you have to respond to. So,
Okay.
I'm trying to
So,
stay on my best behavior. So,
it's hard to disentangle this the threads here. So I did on the chat address that the conversation has to be nuanced. So I was asking at everything is politics. Did I did I address the issue? I feel like I think the comment came before I said my piece, which was that I can't even remember what I said, but I did think that it was important to contextualize what was going on so that we're not reading back on the particularly we're talking about the Black Power movement. What was going on in the Black Power movement based on what we see now, which is Black Power. Black Power movement was completely masculinist, and it was sort of masterminded in that way, and not think about what was going on at that moment in time, which was that people were fighting against Western hegemony, right? Which was in and of itself patriarchal. And so I know you, Tandi, have interviewed a lot of women. I know you have too, um, Professor Waithe, um, Nozibele, and one thing that comes up is that often, and not always, but often, is that people were trying to decide which way to go. What did it mean to protect Black women? Some people, women and men, thought, well, if we return to our traditional roles of women in the domestic realm and men dealing with um, the public, so-called public realm, that would be a protection. That would be the very thing that we're talking about, protecting Black women. Um, I remember I was having when I first started researching this topic, I had we had an interview with one of our sisters, Osset sisters, Nozibele Harimaat, and I was talking about how women, did not, a lot of the women in the Black Power movement, in particular Black Power cultural nationalism, didn't take this sitting down, right? They resisted, and she asked me, but what if initially when you're saying that these women were relegated to hearth and home and inspiring her man and taking care of teaching the children, what if that was a way of seen at that in that moment as a way of taking those women out of the rat race, taking those women out of, and so we talk about it. The lady who we both know, Nozibele and I, said, and then we were thinking, what would be the best structure for our communities and for our nation becoming so that they could fight patriarchy, and that patriarchy ruled the day and no other country was going to respect a feminized African American nation, right? And so there were a lot of issues that were going on, and people were trying to figure out which way, and people did actually look at what they saw as African history and culture, in terms of like the existence of queen mothers and matrilocal communities, and say this thing that we're dealing with is out of balance and we need to get to a different point. But I agree to say what we did and what they did, no comparison, and then sort of put everybody in a big bucket is not the way to go. And I think that's what you were resisting, right, Professor Waithe? Like to say, okay, and so to get back to Africa meant to get back to this essentially more balanced set of gender roles, and that's not the best way to approach it. In particular, because there's not one culture in Africa. It was multiple cultures and many cultures over space and time.
Yeah, and I think that's what people tend to do. They tend to look at Africa as a monolith, right? And say this is what all Africans do. Is to the bad. Is so bad that some people think that they can compare, and it's an apples to apples comparison of African deities. So they can look and say, Mommy Water is just like Yemen Yah. Or, if you have this deity, Gu is just like, Ogun in Yoruba. It's not a one-to-one comparison. So when we talk about the different things, let's be very specific, right? So we're talking about anti-intellectual. The Kikuyu had a practice until very recently that if a woman was married and her husband passed away, she was forcibly married to that man's brother. She had no say in that, right? So that is taking away a woman's power and autonomy, right? If you have other people in the Gariama people, for example, when you become of age and when you have your first menses, you are automatically married off to someone. You have no choice in the matter, right? And let's not even go into the cultures that value and pride virginity. That if you marry somebody and they assume that you're not a virgin, that how you can be killed, right? So when we talk about, Africa not having patriarchal systems and not exerting power over women, we need to be clear that they did force violence. They did force rape. Not everyone, some people, because I'm not saying all Yoruba people did this, right? All Ewe people did this, but there are some cases that violence was enacted upon women, and we need to talk about it beforehand. And I think I just
everything is
spoke against a particular group, the Kikuyu.
She wants to go. She's looking at West African groups like the Wolof, the Yoruba, the Ashanti.
Oh, definitely.
And so
The
my
Wolof,
reference,
the Wolof,
and
they have that
Yoruba.
heavily Islamic influences. And a lot of times when you have the Islamic influences, you have the female circumcision. So a Wolof culture is primarily influenced by Islam. So in some cases, women in the Wolof culture undergo female circumcision. So that is a particular, and that's a very tricky thing, right? Because when you look at people and their culture is ethnocentristic, for me to go and say that that's wrong, right? I can't judge a cultural practice, what they do, because culture develops within the context that the people live in, right? So stuff just does not spring up spontaneously, right? But it is a practice that happens, right? And we have to be real about that. We have to talk about the Berber women in North Africa that undergo, female circumcision, right? So all those things are things that happen in African cultures and societies, and we have to be aware of.
Yeah, I think the main idea was that we were trying not to essentialize. It seems as if we're trying to do the same thing. Everything is politics, but we're saying it in different ways. So, I mean, it is also awkward because we're having a conversation through the chat, and so there's a lot that's being missed in the translation. So you're saying no one said that and things like that, but it's hard to have a full conversation in an hour on a broad topic and back and forth between real time in the chat, verbal interaction in the chat.
Yeah, because much of what we're talking about, I find myself wanting to go off on a tangent, which is why I haven't said as much as I might normally do.
Right. Yeah. I feel like this whole thing is a tangent. Right?
Yeah, I find myself very much so wanting to help us try to be as concise as possible, although there are just so many dimensions. But I think the other component here that contributes to violence against women, and we don't have time to unpack this at all, but I do think I want to name it. It's just how we deal with gender and gender expansiveness, how we understand gender as an embodied reality, and the response to that either difference at times or the relationship that we have culturally to gender expressiveness as it relates to maleness. Because I think
So,
culturally too, that
Estee, Ifetayo, can you mute
Sorry.
if possible? Thank you, sis. It's there we go. Okay, go ahead, sis. What were you saying?
Oh, no problem. Could y'all hear me? Do I need to repeat? You hear me? Okay, good. Yeah, so I just wanted to put that out there because I think what we're talking about too can get slippery a little bit when we're saying violence against women and how that shows up. Because even there are ways that the things that we do, the things that we say are violent or mitigate violence. In addition to, of course, what we know is much more finite. So I just kind of wanted to name gender and our understandings around gender and the expansions and the expansiveness of gender, and that too, in and of itself, even sometimes how we understand it can be violent and mitigate our violence.
Absolutely. So did we? Well, I think we named. I'm almost positive we named patriarchy, but I feel like we have not talked about patriarchy enough and how it shows up in our community. I think that we do a lot of talk about, pre-colonial Black Africa, about being a colonized people under white supremacy, of having quote unquote European or Euro-American model of manhood and womanhood, femininity and masculinity being imposed upon us. I still can't get to the white man's neck though. Get me to the neck. Don't ask me why dinner ain't ready. I'm trying to get to the neck. Don't tell me that that's not my role. Let me get to, I have as much right to get to the neck. I have as much right to get to the neck as anyone else. Don't tell me because I'm a woman, I ain't got no right to try to get to the neck. So I want to get to the neck. Now you got to leave too. Come on, sis. Everybody got to go today. Corrie done bailed. She didn't even say goodbye. She's like, I got to go. I'm out.
And I think more so because you have to go, Estee. Do you want to chime in because you are a healer and a therapist about possible solutions?
Yeah, sure. Maybe this is just the kick I'm on today because it's kind of what the ancestors woke me up with this morning. But the best solution we have is ourselves. So that's the energy I'm in today. So I'm just gonna speak from that place. And I do think there's a lot of practical ways we can start, right? Like by being willing to be curious, by being willing to approach what we see as different, what we see as harmful from a place of curiosity to really kind of discover and figure out what's up with this, like what's really going on here, and then how does it relate to me in a way that I can be helpful. So I think about in my own life, I use myself as an example. In my own life, we have tons of violence in my family that we just don't talk about, that we just don't deal with, that we just act like doesn't exist. But there are times where just in being willing to ask a question or to be compassionate with a family member, with a woman in my family, if it's a holder of the secret or if it is a person who is the victim of the violence, and it has created space for me to find ways to have an inroad, to deal with how we can, if nothing else, begin to free ourselves and untangle ourselves from the webs that the violences themselves can weave. I think, of course, we can take these kinds of larger and communal positions, but I think the thing that I would say too as a solution there is to find the ways that communities hold your truths, that communities keep you safe, and then use that communal space to get your foot on the white man's neck. as
Hands.
you want your hands out. So
Hands.
for me, it's a foot. But that might be my people. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just feel like if I could just get my foot right there in that crease,
The crease.
we could get some work done.
Yeah, for me, it's the knee. It's the knee.
Yes. Yeah, so there might be an ancestral study to do here. Like, what's up with that? But yeah, I think that if you can get in a communal space where you are safe, you can do more together. You can do more together. And you know, silence is consent. Silence is complicit, right? So finding the ways to press yourself beyond the places you yourself might be silent. Even if it's just because that's what you learned and been taught to do. And then allowing yourself to be located in a place that you can safely act. I think it's a good place to start. So yes, I do have to jump on the call. I love y'all. Please continue the conversation. I'll jump back on and watch.
Love you, sis. Thank you.
Bye.
It is 10. Well, for my time, it's 10:01. Everybody got to jump off. Ifetayo is driving. We don't want her to have a wreck or anything like that. So we can give it about 4 or 5 more minutes. I'm not sure. Well, Ifetayo, she's listening. But
I'm listening here. I am almost home, but yeah, I'm
did
sorry.
you want to jump in from the road or no?
I'm like 2 minutes from the house, so if y'all have to get off, that's fine.
Okay. Well, we'll see what happens in about 2 more minutes. But yeah, so Nena gave her thoughts on solutions. Of course, my thoughts are going to be we have to continue to persevere and be persistent. We have to continue to name these things, to talk about these things, organize about these things, and yes, get strapped, learn how to defend yourself, and be prepared to throw hot lead. I think that is a substantial part of lowering percentages. Now, we've got the documentation of how many sisters have signed up to own weapons and to train with those weapons because of the threat of white supremacy once Donald Trump became president, beginning in 2016 and coming on through 2022 and 2023. Sisters are the fastest growing group of gun owners. You have places like in South Carolina, a sister who's got a business called Chicks with Triggers. Here in Los Angeles, we've got a Black-owned gun store, which also provides training and classes. Lots of trainers, lots of instructors around the country are talking about the fact that more sisters are becoming comfortable with weaponry, are purchasing and learning how to use them. And again, the reality is that it was Trump and this threat of this return to a naked white supremacy, which created this surge. But the reality is that we may also have to use it in-house.
So I never. Oh, am I? No,
you're not.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't disavow the effectiveness of self-defense, in particular trained and practiced self-defense. And I am saying that not as a person who is doing it the way I should, but as one who is continually reminded about that in particular by the men who love me and look out for me in my life. But again, with the nuance, I'm not exactly sure that the data suggests that in this society that's as anti-black and as anti-black woman, as anti-woman and anti-black woman, that even defending ourselves will be treated, our self-defense, right? Our working in defense of ourselves will be treated fairly and equally. So I remember going, I don't know if it was National Women's Studies or Association for the Study of African American Life and History, but I remember sitting in sessions with historians that were studying this issue. This is not an issue I study deeply. Um, and they were saying that mass incarceration rates for Black women who were involved in situations of domestic violence are way out of proportion to, I mean, and I think we've seen some of the sort of more sensationalized accounts in the news. A young teenage Black woman is being trafficked and is in jail because of shooting her, the person who's trafficking her, right? um Excuse me if I don't get all the details perfectly correct, but and then I don't know if we've forgotten the sister, what was her name, Melissa,
in Florida, but I did
in
for
Florida, right?
Marissa. I think it's Marissa.
Marissa Alexander, yeah, in
In
Florida,
Florida. Mhm.
right? So I think
And even the case of CC McDonald, a trans woman.
mm,
Mm.
I'm not familiar with that one. But yeah, so I don't think one solution alone will help. So to go back to everything is politics, on her comments, yes, seeking and a more African centered way of getting back to a balanced society in terms of gender is one approach. Knowing the signs, I thought maybe Dr. Ojelade would be here to tell us about the signs when somebody, a woman is, Black woman in particular, is being victimized by violence, so we can help her and advocate for her, contributing to organizations that work on this issue, and supporting politicians that can get legislation passed that will help with this issue. I think it has to be a multi-pronged approach.
Well, I never said that was
Yeah.
the sole solution.
Okay. Yeah,
I
I
want to
understand.
be.
I just
That's
wanted to
part
go.
of. Not only is that a part of the solution, when you're in the heat of the moment and faced with danger, you're not going to stop and try to get a petition on colorofchange.com.
Yeah. I,
Sisters have always said, I will, as much as we hate it, as much as we don't want to do it, are we going to tell Black women, don't call the police if your life is in danger? We're not talking about you mad at somebody. We're not talking about you trying to get back. If your life is absolutely in danger in the moment, are we going to tell them not to call 911? Are we going to tell them not to? I'm not going to tell them not to train, but I'm not going to tell them not to use a weapon. I'm absolutely going to tell them to get some training, because you don't want to shoot somebody because you're mad at them. This is only as a last resort. Only as a last resort. And just like we say in politics, everything is on the table. That should
yeah.
be one of the tools on the table.
And I was going to say some of the things that you were saying, Dr. McCray, in terms of supporting women organizations, being active in your community, definitely aligning yourselves with other women, looking after sisters that you know who have been helped, have been harmed or may be harmed. In addition to that, and also the male female balance, getting back to that to find that. But also healing, right? I think that is one of the things that we need to talk about in the African American community, right? A lot of focus is on self-determination. A lot of it is on, cooperative economics, right now, probably just name it Nguzu Saba. But the reality of it is that African people, we need to heal, right? And one of the ways that we heal is taking out the mirror again and looking at ourselves and addressing some of the things that may be uncomfortable, right? And not only do we face the things that are uncomfortable, we work toward solutions that are healthy, right? Because sometimes, and I'm glad Dr. Ojelade is here because I know she can speak on this, because people always say hurt people, right? So we have to make sure that we continue to heal. And once we heal individually, once we heal, as our families, once we take the healing out to communities, once those communities take those things out to nations, then we can see a real change, right? But healing starts within ourselves and it branches outward.
Dr. Ojelade, would you like to join us?
Oh, and I love that necklace, girl. You always be looking nice. You got braids. Look at you.
I'm just back from Zanzibar, so this is my Zanzibar look going on. Got my
Okay,
braids
don't rub it in the face of the people who couldn't go with you. Don't do that. Okay.
Girl,
Don't
she
do
told
that.
me the day before. She told me the day before.
Could you join the conversation and stop bragging, please?
Sorry. Okay. So yeah, I mean, the thing I was thinking of like solutions, since that's kind of the part I heard at the end. And I am thinking, particularly when it comes to violence against Black women that's committed by other Black men. I'm not even talking about outside our community. I'm talking about within our community. And I mean, I think there's a couple of things. One, just we as sisters, like having an awareness of who can potentially be violent, and not just simply looking at physical violence, but also looking at verbal violence, emotional violence, and how that can lead to other things. So even if this man doesn't hit you, does he encourage other people to hit you? Does he, do other things that are problematic? I think we need to look at that. The other thing is, how do we hold, if we are in relationship with Black men, how do we hold them accountable for their behavior and holding their brothers accountable for their behavior? So I remember years ago, there was this kind of controversy within a community that I was part of, and the one man within another community had hit his wife. And the Black men immediately stood up and were like, that's not gonna happen. And I think that is important, so not just having for sisters, are we in relationship with men that just be like, well, that's my boy, that ain't my thing, I'm not in that, or are they the type of Black men that are going to be like, this is not going to happen, I'm not okay with this, you're going to have a problem with me if you are doing these things to another sister, even if I'm not in a relationship with her. I do think that is important. And that's like at the physical end, but I think even just like there's more subtle ends of, are you calling Black women out of their name? Are you being problematic in your relationships towards Black women? And again, are the sisters that are in relationship with you, are they calling you out? And are your brothers calling you out? Is the community calling you out? I think we need to start right there, because there's a lot of things that happen within the community that people never say anything about. Like, so for example, Thandi, I don't know if y'all talked about, remember the article about the man that shot the woman that played him in basketball, and he got mad and went home, got a gun, and came back and shot her.
I remember it, but we didn't bring that one up. No.
Okay. And so this was in Houston within the last year. She young sister, just on the court, she can play ball. And so she played against his brother, embarrassed him real bad. And when we were growing up, if you lost, you just you took that hit.
You took the L.
Yeah, you just took the L and you just kept it pushing. He decides that he's so angry that he lost to a woman that he gets a gun. He doesn't know this woman. He goes and gets a gun and shoots her. I am not just concerned or curious about him and like what's going on with his fragile tissue paper ego. I'm curious about the other people around him, And so my conversation that I want us to push towards is, are we holding the people in our lives accountable for their behavior? That's
UNITY. UNITY.
And I think a lot of problems could get resolved if we did that, if we held people accountable. You know?
Possibly. But, I mean, well, we don't know because we're not doing it. So maybe if we try it, let's see what happens. It's on the table. Let's put that on the table.
I'm just saying a basic thing of like, you know, you having Thanksgiving dinner and you got, I ain't gonna use the name of it because Nozibele gonna get mad. Uncle Raekwon and them that come to Thanksgiving dinner. See, I got a new name, Nozibele. And you know, Uncle Raekwon is always beating on his wife. Uncle Raekwon can't sit at my dinner table. I'm saying basic things like that. Hold people accountable for their words and their behavior.
Agreed.
It should absolutely be on the table.
I'm looking at Hope P says, now looking the perspective of being called out of our names, we have to expect more from ourselves because as I visit the HBCU campuses that my twins attend, both in different states, the females routinely calling each other casually out of their names. So we have to hold ourselves accountable as well. Yeah. I'm always baffled by just even as women that we would call ourselves, you know, other than sister. I'm always confused.
And there's certain establishments here in the AU in Atlanta.
What you mean?
Like if you walk into a certain place, you're greeted with, "Hey, slut."
Oh, why you say it like that? Tony, do you know what she's talking about?
Yeah, I thought that was rather interesting. Like, what's up today, slut? And all levels of sluttiness. I was like, wow, okay.
And so here's what the problem is. So I don't know why you want to name the place or no. But anyway, okay. So if you've been there, you know. So I know what she's talking about. It's not hard.
It's a food establishment.
It's a food establishment
that's very popular and is branched into other areas outside of Atlanta. I understand.
But the point is, I agree with Hope that we can't be so casual in terms of the names we call each other, or you know, the way that we speak to one another, because I believe you speak truth to power, and your words have meaning and impact. And if you are going around calling yourself a slut, you calling yourself the N word. I mean, let's talk about all the derogatory ways that some people address themselves. We have to be accountable for all of that, right? So that could be one of the entryways or entry points where we stop violence, when we start thinking about how we address each other and how we speak to one another, right? Because I think if you meet somebody and you call somebody a bitch right off the bat, that's a gateway, right? That, like how they talk about gateway drugs, that's a gateway until next thing you know, things happen. So yeah,
I was just thinking about literally what you said when you address some people walk in the room, bitch, and you be like, what? I'm like, how did we get to this point?
Just how I remember some things that, you know, and I don't know, you know, maybe I'm dating myself, but is some things you didn't want to be associated with, and certain things you just didn't want to call, you know, not because you weren't proud of your sexuality. It wasn't that you were ashamed of who you were, right? But definitely it's just out of respect for yourself that you didn't want people to do that. So
yeah, I was thinking about that because I've had to say to a number of people that I've met, you know, just brothers that I interact with, or, you know, just even folks that I just remember, you know, European on a trip recently, and somebody was just using the N-word, and I was just like, yeah, no. And I think it has become such part of some people's lexicon, like their everyday language that they use, that they don't see anything wrong, calling, my N-word, or, calling somebody a B, or like you said, slut, or, I just like, how do we get here? Can we start with just sister, brother, fam? Can we start there, please?
I miss that. And the funny thing to me is when people try to distinguish it by saying that I'm not saying the N-word ER, I'm saying the N-word AH. Like that makes a difference. I mean, come on, dialect people. That is the same thing, right? It's the same thing. You can't justify it.
I'm guilty. And I don't justify it. I'm just admitting I'm guilty.
I've never heard you say that, Thandisizwe.
Yeah, I never.
I only in certain areas I use it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I just think if we're talking about, because lots of times on these conversations we talk about African spirituality and the importance of our connection with ancestors. We know from the perspective of African spirituality that words have power. A lot of the things that we're doing to initiate ritual is through words. And so if we know that, then how do we then turn around and call ourselves the N-word? Or, call our sisters a B, or call ourselves a B? I think it's problematic.
I think one of the, it's not one of the most profound things I've ever heard. But I remember a couple of years ago, I was talking to Nigerian Babalao, and he was talking about the different language that Americans use. And he was like, and you pray to God with that mouth. And I was like, he was like, the same mouth you use for prayers, you are spewing, those vulgarities. So how are you? And then the person was like, well, I ain't praying now. He was like, oh, you think God stopped listening to you? Just because you finished, you think God is finished, right? So just because you finish praying and just because you finish speaking doesn't mean God is finished with you. God is always there. God is always listening, right? And from that point on, I was like, I really got to watch what I say. I try, for the most part. I stopped using profanity years ago. I try not to use it. But, like any type of profane language, I try not to use. But,
I have to work on that. So
yeah, the Lord ain't finished with me yet. Yeah.
What do you say? You'll heal in hell. That's the new thing going around TikTok.
Let's not talk about that. But no, I know I have to work on some things. I know that.
Wait, why Njamile texting us talking about y'all old ladies get off the internets?
But she also said that U.S. citizens started calling each other Yankees, and did that open the door for anti-American violence?
No.
I don't know. Why she asked a question that only she can answer? I'm not a historian.
I'm gonna be like, no.
It up.
Did it? Did it, Dr. McCray? Did it?
Okay, now I'm just saying, we 24 minutes over. If y'all want to keep rolling, we can keep rolling. It's up to you.
We can wrap up.
Well, it's up to you two.
Well, I'm gonna have to say see you later. See you later, ladies. As much as I love to sit here and talk about this important topic, I'm gonna have to go. But I do definitely want to say thank you to Everything is Politics and Hope Peace for some very, very thoughtful questions, and thank you for pushing the dialogue along a little bit more. So I thank you for that. Hope and Everything is Politics.
We always appreciate when folks tune in and join in, and even Casa Aha, who says he was late to the function. We appreciate you. You usually very supportive. So
yeah. So thank you so much for pushing the dialogue along. All right. And with that, you wonderful ladies, I will see you a little bit later. Looking beautiful, both of you all. I hope you all have a wonderful Friday. And we'll be in touch because it's birthday season.
Birthday season. I got my little crystal outfit, my little crystal, my fake Beyonce crystal bathing suit.
You know, I saw a gift that I was going to get for you, so don't ruin it all. So if you get on that horse with that crystal, so girl, I ain't gonna be mad at you. I ain't gonna be mad. Take a big picture and hang it right in your house for everybody to see. Because I'll be next.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Y'all have a wonderful.
You gonna close us out?
Well, did you want to hang for a minute and talk more about? Well, I'd like to get more from you in terms of analysis and solutions.
Bye now.
Oh yeah, because we do need solutions. All right. See y'all beautiful people later.
All right. So you take care. Stay safe.
Bye.
Especially because you usually lead us and you wasn't here in the beginning. Especially because of that.
Analysis and solutions. Okay, give me a place to start.
Because I'm just, it's the Omo Ogun. I shoot the motherfucker. That's always gonna be my go-to. Shoot this mother and get it over with. So, coming from the true healer that you are, child of Oshun, psychologist, please. We can't shoot them all.
No. Yeah, you can't shoot them all. And again, I think we have to look at violence as layered, because we're only talking about the physical violence when
the most extreme and most obvious.
But before we get to that point, there's all the things that are in between there. There is you're calling yourselves names, you're allowing other people to call your names, you're in relationships that are unhealthy with men that are controlling or abusive or manipulative, and not recognizing that. And manipulation can come from kind of the overt things that we think about in terms of controlling, or telling us one thing and you're really doing another thing, to subtle forms of manipulation where somebody's trying to control what you're eating, or telling you that you're controlling so they can get away with their own controlling behavior, or promoting violence, promoting other people or encouraging other people to be angry or violent towards you on their behalf. There's all these things that are in between that I don't think that we talk enough about. In terms of violence. Violence can even be someone just not honoring your truth. You have a particular way that you experience and see the world as a Black woman, and someone dismissing that. All of that is forms of violence. And so I think we need to first begin to expand our definition of what is violent.
And yes, violence and harm. I agree.
Yeah. And then once we expand that definition of what is violent, then begin to really think about what are the ways that we can heal from that. And what are that first one being what I was saying is holding people accountable, holding other people accountable, particularly as adults, as Black women, whoever we're in a relationship with. If we're in a hetero relationship and we're in a relationship with a man, or if we're in a relationship, if we identify as queer and we're in a relationship with a man, a trans man, or a woman, whoever we're in a relationship with, holding that person accountable for their behavior and really setting hard boundaries when stuff is not okay and it doesn't feel good to you. And then if you come, like, for example, I think Nozibele was saying earlier, like, violence begets violence. So if you come from a trauma history where there was a lot of violence in your household growing up, then what are you going to do to begin to heal, so you're not just recreating those patterns over and over in your own and within your life and, within the lives of your children and your family and your community? I think for me, that's kind of like the first steps to think about the healing process.
First steps, some good first steps. Very good.
Therapy.
Huh?
I wasn't in therapy, you know, like I'm a big advocate for therapy. So like, I'm like, everybody needs to go to therapy. You know, you need to sit on somebody's couch and, you know, talk about what's going on with you. So a lot can get resolved that way.
There are healing modalities that are available to our community that do not involve shooting these motherfuckers. So, and we need to take advantage of them. We need to take advantage of them.
The other one
There are
is
resources.
there are resources in terms of conflict resolution
Mm-hmm.
that I don't think that we use enough within our community.
Mm-hmm.
There are formal resources in terms of like mediation and conflict resolution, but then there's also, and I think we have to figure out how to get back to this. You and I kind of have that unique experience of both growing up, being born and growing up in Los Angeles. And oftentimes that meant that our families may have been separated from, you know, the rest of their family. But if we look at generations where you could go and call, you know, Big Mama or, you know, Uncle Pookie or whatever to kind of mediate, I do think we need people within our community that we trust that can help mediate conflict, not fuel it, but to help, you know, just, what do you call it when you dissipate the harm?
De-escalate.
De-escalate the situation. Yeah. And we don't have enough of that. I think, I don't know about you, but it feels like every time I open social media, there's some reel of somebody hitting someone or, you know, fighting. Like there's always some violent thing. Even with Al Jazeera, I follow Al Jazeera English, and sometimes they'll blur out the violent scenes and they'll let you know. But then sometimes, you know, you open IG and the first thing you see is some violence that's happening around the world, and we really need to filter that out. So, because otherwise it's in the back of our subconscious, somebody do something to you, and the first response is, let me be verbally violent or physically violent.
You know, at one point we were like, we're not going to share these videos of Black people being killed by the police. We just stopped doing it. We're not going to share these videos anymore. We're not going to post. We're not going to share. We're not going to do this anymore because it was just too much.
Right.
Now, regarding this other violence that you're talking about, understanding the thing of, you know, seeing Black men in particular murdered by the police, the desensitization, saying that we're not going to promote it, at the same time, that doesn't stop it from happening. We know that it's happening. We also know that there's organizations, there are movements afoot to confront it. This other violence, however, what are the movements? What are the organizations that are afoot that are confronting it? So, to a certain extent, have we reached that point yet where we need to stop showing these videos, that we need to stop making people aware? It was a sister who was doing a page. It was called Protect Black Women and Girls US.
Okay.
And she passed away this year, unfortunately.
Oh.
No one else has taken up her work. But if you saw the page, a lot of people would troll her, condemn her, attack her. Oh, you trying to make Black men look bad. It's not all Black men. But if you looked at the page, really, she was just talking about the precariousness of being a Black woman. Black women who died in accidents. Black women who were waiting for health care and didn't get seen. You know, of course, the majority of incidents had to do with physical violence, you know, shootings, basically a lot of shootings, you know, murder, suicide sometimes. It had to do with relationships. But at the same time, and sometimes it wasn't always Black on Black. It wasn't always male on female. It was just the precariousness of Black women's lives. She provided a service to us. Like, look at what is happening. Are you not alarmed at what is happening to Black women? But she ended up passing away. And like I said, no one else has taken up that work. So the question was, you know, what are we going to do about what's happening to Black women? October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. That's why we're talking about that. But it's not just domestic violence. It's a rather precarious existence for us when you really look at it. But like I said, right now we're talking about domestic violence. But my point being was that even though when you open up social media and you'll always see some type of violence and it can be overwhelming, we have to talk about this issue.
Yeah.
We have to talk about it. We have to get with in talking about it, you're able to break the isolation and alienation. You're
Mhm.
able to find people of like minds. How could people who are also going through this same issue? How can we work on this? How can we deal with this? The issue around police brutality and police murder. There's a lineage. There's a long history of us fighting against that. Unfortunately, we haven't stopped it yet. But it's almost, and I don't want to call it intergenerational. I don't want to call it multi-generational. It's been a long struggle. And for those people who drop off, new folks join the fight, bring new ideas. Can we say the same about the movements to stop the violence that is meted out against Black women? Until we get to that point, we have to talk about it. We have to keep talking about it.
No, I agree with you, and I'm wondering because we still got folks that are watching us. I'm wondering what folks think of. What do we do? Do we continue to share the videos? I'm you and I are people that will share videos of violence with Black women, and I
Yeah.
think we always have this thing of
And actually, what more so stories, not just the videos with no context.
yeah.
Like a news story link. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's a story. So, because it's rare actually that I'm showing an actual video, that I'm sharing a video. It is new, like a context, content of a particular story that's happened. And I'm wondering, the folks that are watching, what do you say? Do we need to be sharing this kind of information? Should we not share it? I always find it really interesting because if I go to Zimbabwe, I wasn't in Zimbabwe. I was just in Zanzibar. If I go to Zanzibar and I show a picture of the beach or something like that, or be like, hey, y'all, here's this villa that we're staying in Zanzibar, then, get lots of likes and comments about that. Like people followed me because I was in 2 African countries. And so people followed me every day and I posted every day of everything and, lots of comments and all that other kind of stuff. That's great. And I do appreciate that people are paying attention to that. If I post an article about violence that is happening to Black women, usually what ends up happening is my sister Thandi is going to say, so ain't nobody responded to this? Tell me if I'm lying.
Ain't nobody gonna say nothing? No, they're not.
I mean, it's like totally ignored. And I'm just like, so y'all are interested when I'm in Ethiopia learning how to make injera. And I'm totally terrible at making this, the Ethiopian bread.
Yeah.
So I get a bunch of views on that, likes and all that other kind of stuff. But when I'm like, this dude just shot this sister because she beat him in basketball. Silence. I think that's violent.
That's absolutely violent.
It speaks volumes. And I think it speaks volumes to our beginning, how our ancestors showed up in this country, our beginnings in this country, where Black women's bodies are not perceived as something that needs to be protected and or valued. And so violence against us, whether it be physical violence, verbal violence, medical neglect violence, rape, whatever it is, it's like, it's like it's par for the course.
No big thing.
Yeah.
And for example, that sister that I was talking about, when you protect Black women and girls US, when you look at the page, again, it's the precariousness of Black women's lives. However, She was, because she's basically combing the news.
Mhm.
She's combing the news, talking about these various instances that have happened to Black women. So there's a variety of incidences that have happened to Black women with a variety of perpetrators. But she also was of the belief, as are many sisters, that when, for example, police violence, when something happens negative towards Black men, we run. We got on our track shoes. But when it happens to Black women, we take off the track shoes. We ain't running.
Or then we're defending. Did y'all talk about Megan Thee Stallion earlier?
Yes, we
Oh,
did.
okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just think the response to her, so I won't go into a lot, but I think the response to her was just bizarre.
Well, there's not running, and then there's the flip side of that of blaming the victim.
I'm like, okay, so this woman got shot.
What's your point? What's your point? What's your point? There's people out there who don't believe she got shot.
I'm like, what is wrong with you people? This woman got shot. She was shot in the foot, right?
People who don't believe she got shot by Corrie, but even more people who believe, I won't say more. Maybe a similar amount who believe she deserved it.
And
that's
so
what
then,
she get.
And so then that's what I'm saying, Thandi. What kind of society are we living in where you think that some motherfucker now Nozibele you talking about?
Okay, see. Continue.
That he's supposed to shoot you.
She got shot, and then she's not the one who reported it to the police, called the police, because she didn't want him to get in trouble. That's what she said. I wish you would shoot me and I keep my mouth shut. I wish.
That's bizarre. I mean, and then this whole commentary. Were you there? Like, how do you know whether or not she got shot? But that's a whole. We can talk about the bizarreness of social media and how people decide. They got a whole commentary of what the conversation was and what people were thinking in their head. Now they ain't been there. They don't know anything about it. But that's a whole other kind of bizarre thing. I do think, and here's a comment that Dr. McCray made that I think is important. She said, and actually, let me put it up here so we can see it. She said, and let's clarify that when we say Black women's lives and bodies weren't valued, we mean in a holistically humanizing way. They did actually have monetary value.
Right, because we were property. We were property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's that name? I can't remember the name of it. But whoever's watching, go Google Oscar Brown Jr. What is the name of that piece he does where he's talking about the auction block? Oh my God. I can't remember the name of it, but the first time I heard it, I had to go find the CD because I wanted to own it. I wanted to possess it so I would never not be without it. Where he
bid him in.
And this particular person on the auction block happens to be a Black woman. Yeah, y'all, if you've never heard bid him in, Kenja put up a YouTube. I don't know if there was a quote unquote cartoon or it's a slideshow that goes with it, but it's Oscar Brown Jr., one of our great jazz vocalists, spoken word. And he didn't know he was doing, I don't know if he knew he was doing spoken word, but it was spoken word. Yeah, that piece called Bid 'Em In, man.
Yeah.
That's a powerful piece right there. You have to check that out if you have not checked that out.
I feel like this whole conversation, like we could do another, session, definitely talking about.
Well, the fact that our leader and teacher was not here in the beginning, we put that aside. We can put that to the aside, but we wasn't gonna get to it all today anyway. It's just like it's layered. It's a lot. It's really a lot.
And I also think about, like, as we talk about this topic, as a group of Black women, they're having a discussion. Where are the spaces that we even just hold in for ourselves, where we've had to hold ourselves together because we've experienced violence ourselves? you know, that we may not necessarily bring up. I mean, this topic is so layered, and I heard Estee earlier when I first got on. I heard her talking about that, and like you all just talking about like all the tangents that you could go on this topic because it is so big. It's not just the violence that we experience in this system due to white supremacy. It's the violence that we experience in just like every institution. Did you all talk about even just like workplace violence?
No, we didn't get to that.
Because I mean, I think that's a whole other thing.
Well, I'm sure it is, but once you go back, if you go back over, if not the video, the comments, I'll reserve comment on the comments. But yeah, so there was what I call the attempt to derail. But okay,
I'll look back over.
What about this? And what about that? What about it?
What about black men and this and this? Was
What
it
about this? Like I say, I kept my mouth shut because I was trying to be on my best behavior. There actually are life-size trolls. They do exist. And no, it's not critique. It's trolling.
Oh, see, I should have been on here because then I would have shut
it's
that
attempting
down.
to derail. And other people were nice. Thank you for pushing the conversation forward with your thoughtful question. Okay, all right, all right.
So this just says that we're gonna have a part 2. Like, so just know
And you're gonna be here on time from the beginning.
Yes, I am so
and you're
sorry.
going to set it for us.
I will set it
You're
up
going to set
and
it for
we
us.
will talk
'Cause
about this
I'm not good at
subject.
this.
No,
You see, my response is shoot these motherfuckers. That's my response. Shoot these niggas.
and then look at that cycle of violence beginning violence.
No, I'm not talking about shooting somebody for looking at you cross-eyed the way gang members do. If your life is in danger, you have to protect yourself.
Absolutely.
You have to
I think
defend
that
yourself.
everyone has
And
the
even
right
but what I did not get to say earlier, though, yes, you have Cece McDonald, who's the trans woman. You have Marissa, whose last name escapes me, but the sister in Florida. There are lots of examples of sisters who have defended themselves and are facing prison. That's an intellectual question. When a threat is staring you in the face, people don't know what they're going to do until it happens to them. Right? I advocate for preparing yourself in case that happens. That's part of what my advocacy. I'm not going to tell you not to call the police. I'm not going to tell you not to defend yourself with a deadly weapon. Well, you don't want to do that, girl, because you might go to jail. Well, if you stand there with nothing, you might die right there on that spot. I'm not going to be the one to tell you not to do anything. Well, you might go to jail for 20 years. You will be alive and you will get out. There's a saying that all the brothers, a lot of brothers I know have always said, it is better to be tried by 12 than to be carried by 6.
Oh,
I think that applies in this situation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's that deep. It's that deep.
Wow.
I will never be the one to say, and knowing as much as I be around here with my little hashtag FTP, I be inserting that all the time. I will not tell a black woman not to call the police.
Not if you need to protect your life.
Yeah. I won't be the one to do that.
Yeah.
If it bothers me that you feel that's your only recourse. But if that is, do what you got to do.
Yeah. And so you're not going to get any disagreement from me on that. I'm wondering though, how do we prevent it from even getting that far?
Thank you. Prevention. How do we stop it? We have to continue talking about it. It's a very uncomfortable conversation, but we've got to have that conversation because just as the abolitionists say, people used to think abolishing slavery was crazy. And guess what? It happened. So the lexicon of abolishing prisons, abolishing the police. That's in mainstream discourse now because somebody kept talking about it. And some of those people broke off and stopped talking about it and organized for it. There was a time when it was just a few of us hollering for reparations. You ain't gonna
I
get no
remember.
reparations.
I
Y'all,
remember.
the white man ain't gonna. We got legislation in states. We got city, county, state commissions making studying reparations, making dollar amount recommendations. Why? Because people kept talking about it.
And so that actually makes me
And
have
some
some
of the
hope.
people broke off from talking about it and organized around it. So that's the only way that this is going to be dealt with. Also, we got to keep talking about it and we got to organize around it.
Yeah, you're
Speaking
giving
of
me hope.
organizing, I didn't mention this earlier, but you know I'm doing a show on Black Power Media called Rootwork. And I did every week in August, took a break in September. Tonight, I'm going to be talking with some sisters who are organizing around sex trafficking, domestic violence. They're called Sisters of the Underground.
I heard
So
that.
I'll be putting that out. I think I did put it out last night, but I'll tag you in some of the posts. It'll be 6 p.m. LA time, 9 p.m. East Coast time. Rootwork on Black Power Media.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah. I mean, sex
I mean,
trafficking.
it'll be on live. And if you miss, okay. If you miss the live, you can always catch the replay. No big thing.
Okay. No, I love that. Yeah, because Atlanta, I mean, it's a huge sex trafficking problem here. Huge. I mean, if we even talk about just stuff global, like anytime you go to an African country, you see the sex trade that is there. I mean, it's very obvious. People come from all over Europe, and it's on. It's on.
They still bidding them in to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, and there's other pieces of it. One last thing that I kind of just wanted to go back to was, and I mean, I guess this is a question for you. What do you think? I wonder if there are any spaces where Black men are having this conversation about how to stop the violence that is occurring.
Yeah, and those need to be amplified. There are spaces that are specifically dedicated, like Men Stopping Violence, and then there are other men's groups that are popping up, which are dealing with Black men's emotional and mental health. So of course, relationships is going to come in. They're not specifically dealing or dedicated to that, but they are. I am beginning to see an increase in groups for Black men, which I think is good.
Good.
Or can be good.
I was just thinking also, and I don't want to kind of give voice to the people that do this, but I noticed that there have been, these kind of social media influencers that build their whole popularity on the backs of criticizing Black women. They don't want to be in relationships with Black women because of this, that, and the other. I noticed, people, some of these Black men talking about, oh, I'm a high net worth Black man, and as a Black woman, high value. Thank you. Some of them say high net worth too, but no, the word is high value. And I have been looking at that just a little bit, and I noticed that, and I said, I see that as a potential space of violence towards Black women.
Potential. Actual.
I was trying to be psychologist-y in my commentary.
Psychologist-y. Did you just come up with a new word? You're trying to be psychologist-y.
Yeah, I mean, because if you're always like looking at Black women as y'all are, y'all complain too much, you're argumentative, you too fat, you not cooking enough, you ain't doing the right sex acts. I'll say it that way. In the right way, and taking it in the right way, and there's constant complaining.
It's we're low-hanging fruit, and they're attempting to get likes and clicks and a following. And some people actually believe in that and agree with it and support it. And some people are of the opinion, well, I just want to hear what they got to say. I'm just keeping tabs. Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
I've run into some men that have made that comment that they're high value.
Well,
Really?
see, this is a discussion for another day. The influence of influencers. That's scary. The influence of social media. A sister posted about some brother said he had done extensive research on TikTok. I was like, oh my God. Your research consists of looking at TikTok. Oh my God. We in trouble.
I talk about these people that have
We
these
down
YouTube
bad.
PhDs. They have YouTube PhDs, honey. They
YouTube,
think they
yeah,
know.
YouTube University.
They
YouTube
think they know more
University.
than you, and I'm like, all right, I had this conversation one time with this brother. It wasn't even a conversation, so we won't pretend it was a conversation. And I said something, and for the folks that are listening, this is a pet peeve of mine. Don't say this thing to me. Everybody on social media is talking about gaslighting now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say something and to somebody and they don't like it, they say you trying to gaslight them. And people got all these definitions about gaslighting, and like so all here like the psychological diagnostic terminology and symptoms of gaslighting and how you stop it and interventions and all this other kind of stuff. It drives me crazy. And so I said something to someone at this brother, and I was just telling him, okay, that's not what happened or whatever. I just said something simple. And he was like, "You're trying to gaslight me." And I was like, oh, I hate when y'all do that. That was the wrong thing to say to him. Needless to say, that conversation didn't go in the right direction. But my whole point is that what I was trying to explain to him, I was like, can I tell you it's okay? Is it okay if I tell you what gaslighting is? Because most people don't know.
Is it okay if I tell you?
Or explain why I said, that's not gaslighting. And I've had to say this to a number of people, and he just, I do my own research, and I don't care if you had no PhD, and it went down into this like bizarre spiral of almost like this back and forth. And so I just let it go. I'm like, okay, my bad. That's not what it is. And it to me was an example of how social media influences and the media, like people press stuff on the media and then you see it so much and you begin to think it's real. And
It amplifies nonsense. Media amplifies anyway. So yeah.
Let me just say this to the folks that listen now and the folks that end up watching the replay. Gaslighting is not a psychological term. It is not a psychological term, period, point blank. It comes from a movie. I think it was like 1945, 1946, called Gaslight. In that movie.
Was it a play first or?
No, that I don't know. It could have been. And then that made it into a movie. The man in the movie is married to a lady that has a whole bunch of money. And he don't really love her. He just wants her money. So he tries to convince her that she has a psychological illness so he can get her money. So he does stuff like turn on the lights and in the room she goes in. She's like, I thought I'd turn the lights off. And, and he's pretending like he don't know anything about it, but he's doing all these things purposely to drive her crazy.
The light is literally powered by gas. So when you turn the gas down, the light in the room dims. So that's what they meant. That's where the term gaslighting comes from.
And so like people
are gaslight me. I thought I turned this light off. What are you talking about? I thought I turned it on. Did you turn this on? Turn what on? What are you talking about?
And so my thing is, don't say that somebody is gaslighting because you don't agree with something. The only time that someone is gaslighting you is if you are in a relationship with them and you got a whole bunch of money and they're trying to convince you and make you crazy so they can steal your money. So if somebody ain't trying to steal your money from you, they ain't gaslighting you.
It's manipulation. It's a form of manipulation.
it is a form of manipulation, but I think it's a very specific form of manipulation. So lots of people will just be in disagreement. And they'll say, well, you're trying to gaslight me. No, just because you don't see it the same way that I
I'm not
see it,
trying to
does not mean
manipulate
that
you.
gaslight.
Well, it doesn't
Say it
mean I'm
again.
trying to manipulate you.
So yeah. So anyway, that was like my whole thing. But
That's
the
your
bigger,
pet peeve. Duly noted.
but the bigger thing before that is like, if you can't have conversations with people, you know, like if and I really want us to have this, and I don't know that we are as a group of women that we can really have this. I am really curious about some Black men's egos that may drive violence. Where I say this to my sister friends sometimes, you know, you have to be careful, because some of these men you're dealing with, their egos are like wet tissue paper. And so they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, if you think about it, then if you start like making commentary or doing stuff and you just punching holes in wet tissue paper, you can't repair that. And so I am wondering what is happening, where there is a subset of Black men whose egos are not stronger than wet tissue paper. And then I'm curious about how then that turns into violence against Black women.
Which takes us back to patriarchy and the whole sense of entitlement. And this part I do agree. If you're a Black man raised in a white supremacist patriarchal society, you have been given messages all your life. This is what a man is supposed to do. And when you are unable to do that, that's going to cause a problem for you. You are supposed to be in control. You're supposed to be in charge. Well, under white supremacy, you're not going to be in. You're the greatest threat as a man of color, as a Black man. You are the greatest threat to this white man. So everything he does is going to be to take away your power and control. So if you've been told all your life, I'm supposed to have power and control, well, God damn it, I'm gonna have control in this house. I might not have it out there, but I'm gonna have it up in this mother. You've been told all your life. This is what I am supposed to have. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Not just have. I'm supposed to be taking care of children and wife. And I can't do it without a job.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be protector and provider.
Yeah. Yeah.
My concern is when the messages get mixed up. This is the one that's keeping you from that. Go get him. Not me. Go get this MF.
No, what I can say from a psychological perspective, that's not what people do. Then when they're oppressed, then they're going to oppress other people that have less power than them. So
you mad at me because I want to put my hands around his neck too. Wait.
Yeah. Anyway, girl, is this a good stopping point?
I'd say this is a good stopping point. We broached the subject. We never said we had all the answers. We never said it was going to be neat and pretty. So I hope nobody thought that's what was going to happen.
I mean, I think like I said, I think it's such a broad, I mean, it's a vast topic. We can go down all kinds of, roads and tributaries, thinking about like how to deal, what the violence looks like and how to address it. And I just think the fact that we're talking about this is an important point. Because I think there's in some spaces, particularly in political spaces, we're focused on kind of the overall mission of like what's going on with Black people overall. And it's almost becomes taboo to talk about the fact that Black women are being harmed. So then people want to derail the conversation. Well, what about this brother that was the police killed? But what about the Black women too? So, anywho, you gonna close us out? Since you were leading today?
No. You come and close us out, sister.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we had a good discussion today. Everybody was here today, right? at some point or another?
Yeah, everybody was here.
Okay,
Mhm.
well, y'all, thank you for listening and hanging out at different parts of this discussion. If you are still listening, do me a favor and like and share this video. If you're
Mhm.
watching the recording of this video, do the same thing, like and share it. That's how people get to find out that we are online, whether it be on YouTube, it's shared on YouTube and Facebook. So we are here every first Friday talking about all kinds of things that have to do with people of African descent. And my name is Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade. I am based in Muskogee Territory. It's also known as Atlanta, Georgia. And then my sister, Thandisizwe Chimurenga, and she's at The Root Worker, and she is a social commentator, a journalist, and an author. And say it again.
And an author.
And
with
an
some
author.
No books coming out. Yeah.
And she got the new book coming out. Tell us the name of the new book.
Some of Us Are Brave. Conversations and interviews with sisters on life, art, and struggle.
And she didn't include me in the book, so I guess I ain't old enough. But that's a whole other thing, though.
You'll be in volume 4, sis.
Wait, she didn't say volume 2. She said you in volume 4.
Volume 1 and 2 already done. Well, maybe you'll be in volume 3. I'll see if I can move you up to volume 3.
And then I just want to thank our other panelists that had to go a little bit earlier. Dr. Kenja McCray, who is associate professor, we're manifesting for her. She's assistant professor of history at Clayton State University. She's also got a new book coming out, and she's going to be publishing on NYU Press, and she's going to be looking at Black women and Black power struggle movements. We also had Dr. Corrie Claiborne, who's an associate professor. Now I'm messing up people's titles. Associate professor of literature over at Morehouse College. We had Professor Nozibele Waithe, who is an anthropologist and the owner of Grand Tressa Studio. And then finally we had Estee Nena Dillard, who is a queer sexologist. She's also a reverend, and she's a priestess of Olokun, and she's the owner of Endless Spiritual Consulting. So we are here again every first Friday, hanging out and having conversations about all things that have to do with Black people. So hope that you'll join us again. Take care.
Peace.